Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Abercrombie. I'm teaching faculty at ETSU Quillen College of Medicine in the section of medical education. This video is one of two that I've created in a series on study skills. These are tailored specifically for medical education. However, the techniques and methods can be applied to a variety of courses or exams that you're studying for. This study skills video will focus on learning techniques and methods. So let's get started. Organization is the theme underlying all study skills we're going to discuss. Organizing the massive amount of material will make it much more manageable, but it'll also make the material easier to retain. So material can be organized in a variety of different ways. Some of those are listed here, but the goal was to show various relationships and patterns. Many of the learning techniques and methods that are going to be presented will focus on finding ways that you can organize the material so that you can identify and demonstrate the different relationships. Understanding these patterns and relationships is necessary, not just for medical education, but for future practice. One popular technique great for conveying these relationships is mind mapping. You may also have heard it called concept mapping. You start with a main idea. Here, they started with anatomy, and then place related ideas on branches that radiate away from this central idea. So radiating out from anatomy, we have the literal meaning of anatomy, and then the working definition that also goes into the structural organization. And finally, they've added some additional branches that help display even more relationships. So you can see relating dissection back to anatomy, and also dissection and science back to the scientific method. But why should you map? Well, as we've already discussed, mapping forces you to have that clearly defined central idea, with other ideas organized in a manner that indicates their relative importance to this main idea. This is going to help organize the material into easily manageable chunks. So then you can plan out your study schedule and also align your thought process, almost like creating a scaffolding that helps you go back and hang different pieces of information on. This type of organization is also going to make it easier to identify the links and relationships among these key ideas, allowing even some of the most complex relationships to be illustrated. Now, often you can be overwhelmed with the number of resources that are available, even just maybe for one session. So say you're preparing for this session. You have 2 to 3 textbooks, a handout that's 10 pages long, a 15-minute video they've provided, and another link to a journal article. So you have 5 to 6 huge resources. Compiling all this information to a concept map not only shows you the relationships, but can also help you put everything on a single page for a quick reference. So then as you review, the map that you build will force you to view the information from a new perspective, maybe even from a different viewpoint. Not only does this help you easily identify gaps in your understanding, but maybe you identify some contradictions in the numerous amount of resources, and this helps you get clarification before the exam. Now, mind mapping is a very useful tool when you want to analyze relationships in order to put things in perspective and to prioritize. So what can you map? Lectures while you're listening, or even chapters while you're reading can be mapped. Or you can wait until after, and by doing it from memory as quick as possible, you can use this map as a quick assessment. Then you go back, check accuracy, and fill in the blanks. And filling in the blanks counts as your review. The maps that you've created should actually read like a story. So when they're verbalized back, you're providing yourself with a quick, one-page review of all the key topics that are going to be on the exam. The exam content itself can even be mapped. This helps you focus your studying because you're organizing the material into manageable chunks. And then a similar map like this could also even be used just to organize your study schedule. Here you see a variety of different organizational patterns available for building your map. As you see in this map on the right about trees, any idea may branch many times to include closely and distant related ideas. So for example, trees branch twice, but wood I have branching 3 times. The arrows themselves are going to join ideas from the different branches, but the key here is that they show the flow. So when you go back to read your story, trees supply oxygen. Oxygen is important to humans. We know which direction the flow should be. Now, groupings. Under oxygen, notice that I grouped everything into one single box instead of creating 3 different branches. So these lists or groupings can be created and be helpful making a cleaner, organized map. This is specifically helpful when you're looking at diseases, for instance, and you want to list the findings or common presentations. Now, explanatory patterns will help you show relationships. For instance, maybe adding clinical correlation into your map. I did this quite a bit with anatomy. I would map out nerve pathways, including anatomical landmarks that they were passing over, and then I would go back and try and key in common areas of injury. And then in the key, I would indicate what the clinical presentation would be as the location of injury changed. This allowed a visualization of how the clinical presentation was dependent on the location of the injury. I would simply put a star somewhere along where the injury would be, just like I did there for wood. And then the key at the bottom, I would have a star with a few descriptors there for clinical presentation. So that's one way you can kind of use symbols or even maybe a number with a circle around it. There's all different types of keys you can use that you'll see. So let's talk about a few more tips before we send you off to do your own map. When building your map, always start with a clean slate. Use unlined paper or a clean whiteboard or chalkboard, but have colored markers or chalk because color coding does help. Post-it notes, those are also a great way to create a flexible rough draft, especially if you're kind of weary of technology. But do definitely remember that color coding helps. And connect everything that you can while going as fast as you can. That way it's a true test of what you know and you're finding as many relationships as possible. Don't worry about keeping it clean. You can go back later, clean it up. It makes it a little easier if you do leave a lot of white space. This gives you room to go back for further development or if you want to give explanations. Here are a few different sites that I've used for mapping in the past that are free. So using our tree example, we can go back in. Easily type in everything really quick. And you can see it's pretty simple. I can change the size of the font, add a smiley face, or the key indicators that we talked about, or even add a link. You can attach files, so if you want to attach your notes to organize them. Exam time is another one that has a few more features that will allow you to play back in a very neat way. It lets you play with the color a little bit more, and it lets you attach a few more documents, and it lets you make them a tad bit bigger. So here's a map that most of us have seen many times. Notice the use of color. The blue, almost kind of purple arrows indicate respiration. The black arrows here are showing how everything contributes to decomposition. And then we have the decay contributing to fossil fuels and even combustion. So you can see the complex relationships that can be demonstrated here. Now the video is not over, but this is a great place for me to stop and discuss that you do have an assignment to complete before Quillen's Orientation Boot Camp. Using the content from your first embryo session handout, you're going to build your own mind map. Now, everyone's will be different. We understand that because everyone's going to focus on different content and pick up on different relationships. We just ask that you be creative, have fun, and bring this map with you to camp. Now, either pause and try to do the map now while mapping is fresh on your mind, or simply make a note to remind yourself to come back and complete this map. Imaging techniques involve reverse describing what is visualized. When we're converting what we see and have described into images, we're required to use the right hemisphere of our brain. So whole brain learning occurs, which is going to be better for long-term retention. Clinical application for this. Say you're in your physical exam course, palpating an abdomen. At the same time, you need to be visualizing all the organs and all the anatomy underlying your hand as you palpate. So then you want to verbalize what you're visualizing in your head. This is something you can also use on the anatomy lab prior to doing your dissection on your first patient. Try to visualize what's underneath the surface before going in. Surveying is a great way to prepare for any session. Now, surveying is not going to replace reading. If anything, it prepares you to read because you're simply skimming the material to be studied. And as you skim, you're going to pick up on the topics, the subheadings, maybe the first sentence of the paragraph, but the key is to really take these topic and subheadings and make them what we call advanced organizers. I will show you here in a minute how you can use those advanced organizers. You do want to go ahead and look at all the figures because the tables, the charts, and diagrams are a great place to see how they're summarizing the different concepts you're going to be introduced to. So, lecture notes, for instance. How can you use these advanced organizers? Advanced organizers that you developed while you were surveying can be used to help you prepare your notes for lecture or for review. You'll take this list of advanced organizers, which is simply the list of headings, subheadings, or keywords from the first sentence of the paragraphs that you skimmed, and develop an outline skeleton, just the major headings, or maybe use it to make the first key ideas in your concept map. You can then take this list, the skeleton outline or the skeleton concept map, to lecture, for instance, and fill in the blanks as you listen. This allows you to take less notes and to be more engaged, which is really, again, the key of attending lecture. You could also use these after reading the chapter or after listening to the lecture. Remember, we talked about using concept maps as an assessment to go back and check yourself quickly, and then fill in the blanks as a review. While in lecture, and hopefully not taking too many notes, make sure to employ your active listening. You want to listen for signals from the instructor. If they repeat something, if they say, "Don't forget this," or if they really stress it or continue to summarize it. Those are things that you should probably remember because they're likely going to be on the exam, or they're foundational and the instructor finds them very key to the understanding of the material. Maybe star this, highlight it, somehow signal in your notes that that was important and really emphasized by the instructor. Now, as far as textbook notes, you really want to make use of the text, margins, and all the figures. Just remember, do not annotate the text without purpose. Make sure you're highlighting and underlining to show relationships, because you can apply the same organization and groupings that we discussed early in this video to show the relationships within the material. So you can color the text to match a question that you write in the margins, or you can make notes near figures as explanations, or color code the text that goes with the figure as a description. These can be very helpful for review in the future. I did mention the importance of reinforcement at the end of the other study skills video. And here's an example of how you could use a lot of the techniques and methods we've outlined to do this. So the night and morning before class, you would survey. And this is just to create those advanced organizers from the subtopics and headings. It gives you the skeleton for your outline or your concept map. Then prepare for the session by reading handouts, the assigned text, or if there's videos provided. But you don't want to just jump into these provided resource without skimming and previewing first, so you know where you're taking yourself, and you make sure that you break it up into manageable chunks before you just dive in. Now, reviewing is listed here as well, and this does not have to be done in any specific order. You can review before you prepare, but you just want to make sure that you make time to sit down and review the material from that day or the previous day. The next day in class, you're going to attend, lecture, and engage. Don't just sit there and write notes. I highly do recommend using the advanced organizers list as subtopics, so your notes are pre-organized and you're not trying to write down too much to where you miss what's being lectured. You can then even read through after class. Don't stress about getting it all written down in class. Maybe try and fill it in afterwards, and then as part of the review, go back and fill in from the other resources. That evening, you're going to go back to your review and survey process. Again, whichever order you prefer. But one helpful thing is to realize these learning objectives created for every session by the instructor are very helpful. These tell you what the instructor thinks you should have gotten out of the material, so you can use it as a way to maybe gauge where you are in your learning. You can use concept maps, record summaries of your notes, practice questions out loud or practice questions in groups, or make your own practice questions. Those are all ways to review. Surveying, we're going to complete our advanced organizers, and then we're going to go back into preparing, use some of those methods I just talked about that you can use for reviewing. You're really going to be using your weekends to review what you've done in the past week and to prepare for the coming week. Reviewing is key because as you go back over everything, you want to organize it to allow easy review for when it comes time to exam. Reducing the number of resources that you have to access for review can be very helpful. And again, that's where concept maps and outlines become useful because you're compiling multiple resources into a single page. Here's some of the resources I use to make the presentation. Notice this first link takes you to your textbook page. And on your textbook page, you have the list of textbooks for the upcoming semester. And I just wanted to point out that there are some Inkling and iTunes apps available. These can be helpful if you're a tech guru because they give you a little bit more than the textbook allows, especially the physical exam one. Your videos for physical exam are embedded straight in there. You're able to take notes in your textbook and bookmark different figures, and you're able to take headers off figures both in this as well as in the clinically oriented anatomy text. You're able to just take off all the labels on figures and go back and quiz yourself. So those are great resources if you're comfortable with electronic textbooks.